Welcome to Journey into the Mystic, a podcast where we uncover the powerful intersections between the mystical and Eros. Eros is an essential energy force emerging from our desire for connection with ourselves, others, and the world. It evokes beauty and leads us to understand essential truths, unifying masculine and feminine energies into creativity and genius. Eros is intimate love. Each episode of Journey into the Mystic delves into themes of liberation, healing, and connection, guiding those of us seeking deeper self-understanding and richer relationships. We explore practices and philosophies that unlock new dimensions of being, diving deep into mystical states and their significance for personal growth and well-being. Mystical states are defined as being marked by profound changes in perception, thought, and emanation, offer experiences of unity, timelessness, and deep insight. Whether induced by meditation, prayer, psychedelics, orgasmic meditation, or spontaneous occurrences, these states evoke feelings of transcendence and profound connection. Join us as we explore the path to a mystical state through in-depth discussions, expert interviews, and personal stories, offering insight, inspiration, and challenges at every turn. I am your host, Rachel Pelletier, and I am joined today by a very dear friend of mine, Lama Mike Crowley, known as the Psychedelic Lama. A Vajrayana Lama since 1970, Lama Mike is known for his pioneering exploration of the intersection between Tibetan Buddhism and psychedelics. He has published 2 books, Psychedelic Buddhism, A User's Guide to Traditions, Symbols, and Ceremonies, and Secret Drugs of Buddhism, Psychedelic Sacraments, and the Origins of Vajrayana, where he delves into the historical and spiritual aspects of psychoactive substances within the Tibetan Buddhist lineage. His writings and ideas have sparked considerable debate and interest within the realms of Tibetan Buddhism and the study of psychedelics. His work serves as a bridge between Tibetan Buddhism and the world of psychedelic exploration, making him a notable figure in the ongoing dialogue surrounding these subjects. Lama Mike is also a member of the advisory board of the National Psychedelic Sangha. Welcome, Lama Mike.
Hi there, Wapnin.
How are you?
Oh, moderately well, thank you.
How are you feeling?
I'll get back to you on that one.
Okay, fair.
But I'll let you in on a secret.
Yeah.
Women know how they are feeling at any moment in time. Men need advance notice to tell you how they're feeling.
It is true. Okay, well, I am very excited to talk with you today. So this podcast that I have called Journey into the Mystic is about all things mystical states. I think because I sit at a lot of intersections between Tibetan Buddhism, orgasmic meditation, and psychedelics, I am particularly interested in talking to people in different varieties of mystical states and mystical experiences. And I love your work just in general. It's been brilliant spending time with you. And so I'm excited to have a rich conversation today. So I have some questions and then we'll see where it takes us. You are called the Psychedelic Lama.
Well, who said that?
How did you come to get that name?
Well, I am known as a Lama. Maybe some people call me a psychedelic Lama. I don't think I'm particularly psychedelic, but I have done psychedelics. One of my early teachers was Trungpa Rinpoche, who's like quite famous in this country. I knew him before he came here. He lived in England for a few years first, and he was originally a monk
Mm.
When I first knew him, he was a monk, and
Wow.
he gave up his monkhood as as anyone can in Tibetan Buddhism. You can just say, "Oh, I'm through with being a monk. You can have my robes back." And anyway, that's what he did. But I remember him coming to the Buddhist Society in 58 Eccleston Square, Belgravia, very, very posh part of London, very huge houses. Queen Anne, I think they were like built around 1700, and most of the people who were part of the British Buddhist Society, which had its headquarters at this place, were middle high and upper middle class, and very posh. Now I remember Trungpa telling a bunch of middle-aged upper class women, you should really try this LSD substance. But this, of course, was when LSD was still legal in Britain. He wasn't aware that the Buddhist Society recoiled in horror at a book written by Alan Watts. And although he had been a favorite teacher at the Buddhist Society, as soon as he published this book, I can't remember what it's called right now. Oh, never mind. He published this book, and they read it and went, "Oh my God, we can't have people taking drugs," and and so they banned anybody who had taken LSD from addressing the Buddhist Society at all. Well, and of course, Trungpa hadn't heard this.
Mm.
He at this point he was living in a squat, a house, large house that had been taken over by hippies. And he was living with these hippies in this squat in Notting Hill. And they frequently did LSD together. Now, he didn't tell everyone you should take LSD. In fact, there were some of those hippies there in that squat with him that he told, "You should stop taking LSD. You don't know how to do it, and you're wasting the experience."
Mm.
So I know that when he went to the United States, it was after the restrictions that were placed on LSD. And LSD was made illegal for all but a very, very few people in the United States, and for everyone in Britain. It was placed in Schedule 1 in Britain, which meant it has no medical use whatsoever, which I believe is utterly, utterly mistaken.
Right.
It has a fantastic amount of utility, and the lawmakers were just scared of it.
Mm. Yes, I agree. And then, okay, so you met Trungpa, and then what was your journey from meeting Trungpa to meeting your teacher? Were you doing psychedelics the entire time? Did you have any conversations with Trungpa about the use of psychedelics?
No, I didn't. I had a very interesting and impressive private conversation with Trungpa at the Buddhist Society, and he invited me up to Scotland to Samye. Samye was the first Buddhist establishment in Tibet.
Mm.
Samye Ling means Samye place. So it was named after the original Samye. So anyway, I went up to study with him there, but found that he was surrounded by a couple of dozen acolytes, and so I had very little access to Trungpa. And there was a strange series of events which led me to a colleague of Trungpa's, Radha Chimi Rinpoche. Well, what happened was that I had a neighbor who was passionately fond of jumble sales. That is to say, I think you call them rummage sales.
Okay.
And he would go to at least 3 every Saturday morning and hit them like lightning. He would go, okay, I'll have that, that, and that. And then he's off to the next one and collected all his treasures. And then as he lived just 3 houses away from where I was living, he would come by and show all of his treasures. For instance, he found a sable coat, which he gave to my girlfriend.
Mm.
And the lining was deteriorating. It was in a terrible state. And she took it to a furrier's and asked them to put a new lining on it. And they said, oh, no, we don't deal with any sable unless it's Tuscan, which was the top brand of furs at the time. And she said, oh, but this is Tuscan. And she showed them the skins that were all stamped on the non-furry side with the brand of Tuscan. And so the rather haughty lady had to gulp and say, okay, we'll fix it for you. So that was the kind of stuff that this guy, Len, would find. Anyway,
he had a good eye. He had a good eye for finding things.
He had a great eye.
Yeah.
And especially for pottery and glass and someone he could pick out the best quality stuff in a second. Anyway, he came by one Saturday afternoon and showed me this object which he had he'd found. And he said, yeah, what do you think this is, Mike? I think it's Mexican, some kind of fake Aztec stuff. And I said, no, that's Tibetan. That's and he said, no, I think it's Mexican. I said, wait, I've got a picture of exactly that in a book. I'd just taken it out of the Buddhist library at the Buddhist center in Cadogan Square. And I showed him the picture in the book, and he compared it and went, oh, yeah, oh, it's the same, innit? Well, okay, you can have it. And I said, well, surely it's worth a fortune. I couldn't possibly. And he said, well, it only cost me 6 months. That's like 10 cents or so.
Wow.
And so he gave it to me. But in the book, the caption to this picture in the book said, Tibetan ritual implement. I could tell it was an implement. I could guess that it was ritual, and so I took it to the Buddhist Society and asked if they had any more detailed books on Tibetan Buddhism. And this was, of course, 1966. and there were very, very few books on Tibetan Buddhism. And I was told, no, you've read them all. You've read all three of them.
Oh my God.
And they said, well, the librarian, a remarkable woman by the name of Pat Wilkinson, who had hitchhiked to Burma in the 1920s to meditate at a Buddhist monastery. I mean, you could just imagine hitchhiking, like, and she must have taken ox carts, because I can't imagine there being very many motor cars on the roads in those days. Anyway, she said, well, you've read all the books we have, but there is this Tibetan Lama who has come to London just this week. And if you like, I can phone him and see if he'll speak to you. So,
and that was Trungpa.
No, I'd already met Trungpa. But Trungpa was living in Oxford at the time. And made occasional visits to London. This was one of Trungpa's colleagues, and someone who had known Trungpa all his life. They joined a monastery when they were very small children. And so the guy said, yeah, sure, send him over. And half an hour later, I was having a cup of tea with this Tibetan guy. His name was Radha Chime Rinpoche. And he is still my teacher to this day. He was, he's only 12 years older than me. So he's 88 at the moment, and he lives in Cambridgeshire. And I saw him, I think, 4 years ago, and received his blessing. And I see him occasionally. I saw him every week from first meeting him. I saw him every Friday for the entire day for about 7 years, until he got a job at the British Museum. He was their Tibetan expert at the British Museum. And so I studied with him, and this was when nobody was studying Tibetan Buddhism. They were all into Zen or Theravada. Nowadays, if you're into Buddhism, you are more than likely to be studying Tibetan Buddhism.
It's true.
And I was just incredibly lucky to get in before the deluge. And I learned a bit of Tibetan, and I actually studied with a Chinese teacher too. He was a Taoist, and I learned a bit of Chinese in order to study with him. But my heart was with the Tibetan Buddhists, and the reason I studied with Taoism was because they had some different meditation techniques that they had apparently learned from Buddhists, but these techniques were no longer practiced in Tibet.
So it's Lama Chime, is that right? Chime?
Yes, Chime.
Chime.
Yes.
And
Chi means death.
It means death.
Yeah, me means like a suffix, like less, deathless.
Got it. Deathless. Okay. And is that where you learned the Vajrayogini practice?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I was given the initiation by another Lama, not my own Lama, but a Lama in the tradition, in the Kaju tradition. And my version of Vajrayogini is the one which she stands on her left leg with her right leg raised as if in a dancing posture. I've had this same empowerment several times from different traditions. And I was told by a Sakya Lama, a lady Lama, that she is not actually dancing, she is just in the position of dance. So why she made that distinction, I don't know. I was told that I would have to go on retreat with her to find out, but I've
Did you
never
go on
taken.
retreat with her?
No, I never did.
And how long have you been doing that practice?
Oh, getting on for 40 years, I think.
Wow. Wow. Okay, so I have a follow-up question to that. So you're a long-term Vajrayogini practitioner and teacher. Are you also a teacher of the practice as well, the Vajrayogini practice?
Yes. If I don't give the empowerment, but if my students have had that empowerment, I will teach them the various bits and pieces that I know about it.
Okay, got it. Okay, so here's my question. It's a multi-part question. So if you do the Vajrayogini practice with psychedelics, do you prefer arising as Vajrayogini before, during, or after the psychedelic experience? Or are you always Vajrayogini? So then in which case this question would be irrelevant.
Well, yeah, part of the practice of the meditation on Vajrayogini, and that, by the way, is how you pronounce it. Vajra, not Vajra. Only Americans say Vajra.
I know, I'm American.
I know, but it's Sanskrit, and Sanskrit has specific rules as to how things are to be pronounced. It's Vajrayogini.
Vajrayogini.
Yes.
Okay.
And that final long I makes the word feminine.
Got it. Okay.
If you say yogini, you're mixing up masculine words and feminine words. It's impossible in Sanskrit. So it's Vajra. I almost said Vajra then. It's Vajrayogini. And it's said to be identical to another deity called Vajravarahi. Varahi means sow. And the only difference between them is that Vajravarahi has a sow's head coming out of the right of her head. And actually, I just noticed that I'm reversed in this image. So it should look like that out of the right part. But anyway.
And still red in body or different colors?
Yes. Oh yes.
Always
No,
red.
There is a version of Vajrayogini which is white.
Okay.
And this is a variant I have not had the empowerment for. But at the end of the practice, where it's difficult to know how much to tell you of the practice if you've not had the empowerment. Well, I know that some people watching this will not have had the empowerment, but you dissolve everything into voidness. And then it said, like a fish jumping out of water, you emerge as Vajrayogini. So at any point in your post-meditative life, you can become Vajrayogini.
Mm.
And yeah, so I could go into more detail, but that's only for people who have had the empowerment.
Understood. Thank you. It's beautiful. So I was wondering if you could start by explaining what Amrita is and its use in Buddhism. And then, well, it's a two-part question, actually. And then when was it psychedelic? And if it was psychedelic, when did psychedelics stop being a part of the Buddhist sacrament?
Well, I see there are lots of parts to this question.
Yes.
Amrita, the term Amrita, which literally means deathlessness, no dying, is first found in the Rig Veda. Well, the Rig Veda is the oldest religious text in the world. And it wasn't committed to writing until the 14th century, when the invading Muslims demanded that it be written down. So that was once in the 14th century. And then in the 19th century, the invading British did the same. But the British went one better than the Muslims. They took pundits from various parts of India. I think there were 14 of them. I can't be sure of that, but we'll go with somewhere around that number. And they were all asked to write down or dictate the Rig Veda. And there were remarkably very, very few discrepancies between the various pundits. And so anyway, we had this written down once in the 14th century, around 14 times in the 19th century, and it's been committed to print since then. It's I have a copy of it on my bookshelf, but it's rather difficult to understand. It makes many references to an entheogen called Soma. Soma literally just means juice, from the verb su, to extract. And it's that which was extracted, basically, what we call juice. And apparently, you pick up from the various stanzas which surround this, the use of this substance in the Rig Veda, that it was psychoactive. Now, there have been many attempts to reconstruct what this original Soma might have been in recent years, that is, since the 19th century. Many people have supposed that it was Amanita muscaria, a mushroom which I don't know if you've taken it, but I have, and I was distinctly unimpressed. It had a profound effect on me, but it was not at all, let us say, psychedelic. It's psychoactive, definite, but not really psychedelic. I have a friend, a close friend, who is devoted to this mushroom, Amanita muscaria, and he says the secret to getting the most out of it is that about an hour and a half into the experience, you drink your own urine. This is because the liver converts a slightly toxic substance called ibotenic acid into the somewhat psychoactive muscarine. And I was not prepared to do this, but he swears by it. Now, in this original Veda, there are 4 Vedas: the Rig Veda, the Sama Veda, the Yajur Veda, which has 3 different versions, and the Atharva Veda. Now, in the Rig Veda is the first one, and this has all the verses which will be chanted at the fire ceremony. And in this, they make much of this Soma, which has various synonyms like Amrita, Shukla, and various other synonyms. And if we just went by the Rig Veda, we would have very little clue as to what this was. It describes how it's extracted and so on, but it doesn't give a clue as to what this is. This has led some people who have not read the other Vedas to say that it was various things, including cannabis. And if you do read the other Vedas, one Veda lists the 4 classes of plants. There's food plants, and the head of the food plant class is rice. And there's the psychoactive plants, and the head of that is Soma. We still don't know what Soma is. And there's medicinal plants, and the head of that is cannabis. Or at least in this document, they call it bhang, which in later, even today, bhang is the term used in the Hindi language and in Sanskrit to mean cannabis. So it's quite obvious if we read the subsequent Vedas that Soma was not cannabis. It was something else. Now, there is, of the 3 documents called the Yajur Veda, that's the white Yajur Veda, the black Yajur Veda, and the speckled Yajur Veda. They are all completely different. They don't have one verse in common between the 3 of them. But in one of them, the speckled Yajur Veda, it describes the 2 different kinds of Soma. And the Yajur was composed rather later than the Rig Veda. And it describes these 2 kinds of Soma. One is the red Soma, which is found by the girls who fetch water from the springs. And there's the blue-throated or blue-stalked, I would say blue-stalked, it says blue-throated, Soma, which is found by the boys who tend the cattle. Now, we know that Psilocybe cubensis grows on cattle dung, or actually through cattle dung, but it seems like it's growing on cattle dung. And so this gives us a helpful leg up in knowing what Soma was in ancient times. Now, in these Vedas, Amrita is frequently used as a synonym for Soma. Well, if we fast forward to the Buddhist period, there was a period in, say, the 4th and 5th century, where people from Central Asia, who are called the Sakas or white Sakas by Indians from India, that is, I'm not talking about red Indians, these people referred to them as the Sakas. In other countries called them different things. They were called the Sarmatians, and one author has suggested that that they were also called the Sakyas, which is curious, as to that is the family to which the Buddha was born. Of course, we have no reference to this family outside of Buddhist texts, and they suggest that they were all derived from these invading Sakas or Sarmatians or whatever. Anyway, at this point, we see that there is a substance called Amrita, which is distinguished from the substance called Soma. There is a Buddhist legend about Remati, otherwise known as Sri Devi, which mentions both of them and as separate substances which had their origin in different ways, the mythological ways. We can't take these stories as being authoritative, and they still didn't tell us exactly what they were, but we can assume that some of the original meaning persisted, and that perhaps Soma was Amanita muscaria, and perhaps Amrita was Psilocybe cubensis. I think my own research has borne out this, and I know you've had a recent communication from me where I outline this in terms of the goddess Sri Devi, also known as Remati.
Which I'm going to ask you about.
Oh, well, please do.
You want me to ask now?
So we have this, at one point in India, we can be fairly certain that Amrita meant Psilocybe cubensis. And in a later period in Tibet, when Buddhism had practically died out in India, by about 1400, all the monasteries had been destroyed by the invading Muslims, and no one would admit to being a Buddhist, otherwise they were likely to have their heads chopped off. But many people fled northwards to Nepal and even further to Tibet. And although Tibet had a tradition of Psilocybe cubensis, and there is some evidence in books like there's one called, I think, The Center of the World, written about 20 years ago, that the Tibetans still use, but secretly use, Psilocybe cubensis. There is also a lot of evidence that they substituted this for a mixture of various herbs which are found in the far southeastern corner of Tibet. Most of Tibet is far too high, and not saying that the people got far too high, but it's such a great altitude that nothing grows there. And I met several people who said they'd been to Tibet and had only been actually to Nepal.
Mm.
And there is such a vast difference between the botany of Tibet and the botany of Nepal that um, I would be greatly surprised if they ever went to Tibet. Then in Tibet, you might be able to find a a sprig of grass growing in a field,
Mm.
and over there, about 20 or 30 yards away, you'd see another grass plant. You know, there you would not see a lawn. Um, Wood is very, very valuable in Tibet. You get these stunted willow trees which grow along the Chichu River, and that's about it.
Mm.
The lowest point of Tibet is like 10,600 feet. That's Lhasa, and but it gets much lower in the bottom, well, southeastern corner. And this is pretty much overgrown with the thickest jungle. So um, there are stories of secret lands in this place. These lands are called Sangyul, literally means secret land. And so what were you asking me? I've completely forgotten.
This is great. This is really great. So I wanted to know what Amrita was. And then the follow-up question to that was, when did psychedelics stop being a part of Buddhist sacrament?
Did they?
I'm asking.
Oh no, you asked me when, and I'm saying, did they? Did they stop? Do you have evidence that they stopped?
Well, you say in an interview with Guru Viking that they stopped.
I think you may be taking it out of context.
Educate me.
They,
I'd like to know.
there is a tradition in Tibet of using the mushrooms and of using various formulations of psychedelic. I have met with people who have taken this secret psychedelic recently, and one of my informants was an alcoholic. He no longer is an alcoholic, but he was invited to a going away party on the part of a Buddhist Lama, a Western Buddhist Lama who was leaving a meditation center, and invited a bunch of people to eat up all the scraps of food and drink all the ends of bottles of wine and so on. And this guy had a taste of the wine, and it wasn't enough for him. He wanted to get absolutely blatted. And so he went scrounging around the kitchen looking for more alcohol. And he found this medicine bottle, took the cork out, sniffed it, and said, "Oh, that smells like alcohol to me," and downed the whole lot. Well, this actually was a Amrita. It was Dutsi in Tibetan. And the Tibetan for Amrita is Dutsi, which literally means demon juice.
Oh, wow.
The more literal translation of Amrita is Chime, which happens to be the name of my teacher. My own guru is Chime. And so this bottle of Dutsi was intended for use in many empowerments. And he he just drank about 100 people's doses of psychedelic. And he tripped for about 5 days.
Wow.
And he was told by the Lama, you will be told lots of teachings by Dakinis and various deities, but don't listen to any of them. You haven't got the right empowerments yet. But I think this is one of the ways of getting the empowerments is to drink the stuff. So anyway, there are a number of very high lamas like Dzongchen Khyentse Rinpoche, who have recently performed rituals like the a ritual performed by him in Brazil used ayahuasca. He couldn't get the Tibetan original, so he used ayahuasca as the nearest substance he could get to it. I've seen a YouTube video. It's about an hour and a half long. It's this same teacher, Dzongchen Khyentse Rinpoche, and he says about an hour and a half, well, about an hour and 15 minutes into it, he says, well, I drank some peyote tea before I started this lecture, and I'm not feeling a thing yet. And so I have to imagine it's not really very potent. Well, it was obviously the first time that he tried peyote, because it can take anything up to 3 hours to come on. And when it comes on like gangbusters. So he he would radically change his opinion after a while, I would imagine. So I'm firmly of the opinion that the Tibetans do use psychedelics, at least the ones who are connected with the right traditions. My own teacher, Chime, I was having a private conversation with him one day, and he said, people tell me that you take psychedelics. Is this true? And I said, yes. And he said, good, and changed the subject. Because, I mean, there are teachers, mostly Mahayana teachers like Zen and so on, and obviously Theravada teachers who say the fifth precept of the 5 pansil, the 5 vows that we take, includes psychedelics. It includes all drugs. And it literally says, I will not drink alcohol. In fact, the Tibetan version says, I won't drink beer, which I'm quite happy to stay with that one. Well, it says I won't become intoxicated with beer. You can have one cup of beer, and that's fine according to the teachings. But then these Theravadan teachers and Mahayanists, like well, those who teach Zen, for instance, say that not only shouldn't you have beer, you shouldn't have any drugs of any kind. And that's actually their own insertion, their own rewriting of the fifth vow, which says, I won't drink alcohol. The other vows, by the way, are not to kill, not to steal, not to lie, and not to have inappropriate sexual contact, and then the fifth one is not to drink alcohol. The inappropriate sexual thing is not to have sex with monks or nuns or anyone who has taken vows not to have sex, and not to have sex with children or anyone who still lives with their parents in literal. That's what it literally says.
So then why would they insert this extra piece into the vow?
Oh, because they're neurotic, that's all.
Okay.
And because they've never had it themselves, and they
Right.
don't. I watched something last night by a pompous Indian teacher by the name of Sadhguru, who said that, nobody should take cannabis, and he mispronounced it at least 5 times. And so somebody should take him aside and dose him with cannabis, and like, oh, you said you didn't want cannabis. This is different. And I can't remember how he said it, but it was like way off. And anyway, I would like to see his reaction to mushrooms, in fact, because that's an eye opener for most people if they're not used to drugs. Just have a gram or two of mushrooms.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm familiar with people who regularly take 30 grams of mushrooms.
And what are those experiences like?
I've never had it.
You've never
I don't know. I've never had 30. I mean, I've had several grams, but not 30 grams. That must be mind-blowing.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in 4 hours, 5 hours tops, they're back to normal, and they tell you all about their trip. And it varies from being amusing to being terrifying. But they have to, whatever they see, they have to incorporate. And to say that that dragon I was talking to is actually part of me.
Yes.
Assuming they saw a dragon, of course.
Right. How do you advise someone who during a psychedelic experiences the subtle world of spirits and the God realm?
Ignore it.
Okay. And if you
I mean,
said
it may be
someone...
true. They may be experiencing what's really there in front of them, but
right.
Just meditate. And just as you would not dwell on it, the things around you in the room, not on that picture behind me, not on the lamp over here. If you're meditating, you just meditate on your breath or certain syllables, and are not distracted by the outside world. In the same way, you will not be distracted by devas, maras, dakinis, whatever.
Right. Okay, got it. Okay, so next question. How is it that a physical material thing, so psychedelic, has an impact on the mind?
Everything has an impact on the mind. You try going without food for a few days.
Right.
That's going to have a massive impact on your mind. if you want to get into the details of it, psychedelics affect certain synapses in your brain. There are parts of your brain which respond to dopamine. There are parts which respond to serotonin, and so on. And these substances encourage the brain to release the neurotransmitters, and this has an effect on your physical brain, on the neurons in your brain. I am not a neurologist. I don't profess to understand them in detail, but I do understand them in principle. And so it's nothing spiritual as such. It's purely physical, as almost everything is.
Right. Got it. Okay, so here's my last question. I have more, and maybe we'll do a part 2 to this interview, but for today, I have one final question, which is, why do you think that people are searching for emptiness? And what has people know that the answer to ending suffering and the causes of suffering is the experience of emptiness or totality?
Well, you know, the original first teaching of the Buddha was on suffering, the cause of suffering, that there is a way of stopping this suffering, and the fourth noble truth was the way in which you do this. That suffering happens, it happens in a certain way, and there is a way of stopping it, and this is the way. Basically, those are the four noble truths. The Buddha spent his life explaining the last of the noble truths, the way to avoid suffering. It is not necessarily just voidness. Voidness is largely misunderstood. It's not the experience of nothingness. It's the experience of everything, but without labels.
Yes.
Without putting any saying, this is a cup, this is a table, and so on. It's being able to experience the world without labeling anything. Now, that is one way of experiencing the world. The other way is that is what Nagarjuna called absolute truth. There is also relative truth, in which this is a cup, that is a table, and so on. I mean, if I were to look out of the window and see the sky, I would see it's blue. And so if I had a spaceship, I could travel up to the sky and investigate it and find that the blueness disappears completely, and I'm left with nothingness. Well, that shows that relative truth, and saying the sky is blue, is contingent on various things. The sky is blue when seen from here. The sky itself disappears and is no longer in existence if you go up beyond a certain height. So these terms of voidness and so on are helpful to a certain extent, but they're not absolutely true. The absolute truth can't be placed into words. We can't say what is absolutely true. It's just whatever is. The Buddha made a famous sermon in which he didn't utter a word. He held up a blue flower and then watched to see who got it. And the one of his disciples, Subhuti, smiled, and he said, "Right, you got it." So there is like the greatest teachings are the teachings which go beyond words altogether.
Thank you. This has been so lovely. I hope we can do part 2.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
If I'm still around.
You will still be around. You have a lot of
thank you.
wisdom to give.
I'm so glad that someone's agreed that I have to be around.
Eli, Jamie, and I have all agreed you need to be around. Yeah. Okay, I will talk to you soon. Thank you so much for being a guest.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Bye now.
Thank you for joining us. This has been an episode of Journey into the Mystic. I am Rachel Pelletier. Thank you again to Lama Mike Crowley. We will see you again